Can you imagine waking up one day to your house being swallowed up by sand, dirt, and dust? Can you imagine getting caught in a black blizzard and getting blisters up and down your arms and legs? This is a fraction of what life was like in the 1930s. Hi, I'm Moriah Eben. I'm the 17-year-old daughter of Gary and Brenda Eben of Keldron. Ken Burns, director and producer of the film The Dust Bowl, stated, "The Dust Bowl is the greatest man-made ecological disaster in the history of the United States and perhaps the world." Let me give you a history and a timeline of the Dust Bowl era. From 1914 to 1929, the economy was booming. Wheat crops were amazing. All you had to do then was plant a seed in the ground. Because of this, everyone was plowing up hundreds of acres at a time. The Great Plow-Up turned 5.2 million acres of thick native grassland into wheat fields. In April of 1929, Black Friday hit. The economy began to drop drastically. Wheat crops went from $2 per bushel to 40 cents per bushel. In the summer of 1931, the drought hit and would last the rest of the decade. 1933 recorded 38 dust storms. In September, the Soil Erosion Service, SES, was created in the Department of Interior. April 2nd, 1935, a dust storm blew into Washington, D.C. from the plains, just as H. Bennett, director of the Soil Erosion Service, was testifying before the Congressional Committee about the need for a national soil conservation program. He went so far as to open the curtains for everyone to see the great ball of dust. April 14th, the Great Black Blizzard hit at full force, causing dramatic destruction of farmlands. April 17th, the Soil Conservation Service, SCS, is created in the Department of Agriculture, assuming the role of the 1933 SES program, expanding their responsibilities. Also in 1935, the Soil Conservation Act was passed, initiating federal government to promote conservation. The SES and SCS used land plots for experimenting new farming practices, which were devised to teach farmers what would make soils less vulnerable to water and wind erosion. In 1937, local conservation districts were created to instill various soil conservation ethics in various rural communities. Some farmers were very resistant at first, but they soon seen the major difference it was making and began to follow suit. 1938 brought an estimated 65% less soil erosion despite the continuing drought and windstorms. In 1939, the drought comes to an end as rains return in the fall. Now in my area, there is still evidence of the practices that conservation taught us years ago, as well as new practices that even my family uses today. Some of these practices still show some resistance, but eventually with conservation education, farmers will become less resistant. Living fence lines, also known as tree rows, was a popular practice. Farmers would plant many trees in a row, separating their fields to help keep the soil where it belonged when the wind blew. There is still a living fence line in use today on the land that my great-grandfather had during the Dust Bowl. Crop and fallow rotation was used by my family for many years. Fallowing has since moved on into no-till planting. Instead of plowing up the land prior to planting your crop, no-till allows you to leave the after-harvest stems right there in the ground. This helps to keep the soil where it belongs, as well as helping the quality and quantity of the crops. Crop rotation is a technique that is becoming more popular. This is when you plant wheat in a field one year, corn the next year, and you may follow this with sunflower the next year. By rotating crops, you are helping the soil. Another popular practice today is to include cover crops in the rotation, such as millet, turnips, peas, etc. Since the implementation of conservation in conservation districts in the 1930s, this has proven to be one of the most successful government programs. By 2001, nearly 3,000 conservation districts existed, one in almost every county in the nation. With conservation constantly changing and educating everyone on how to protect their land, and by working together, we have and will prevent another Dust Bowl. Thank you.